people who is morning right now. So welcome everyone to the Somali Energy Cafe. It's been a long time coming. We're excited. My name is Juliet. I lead communications for the Power Africa East Africa Energy Program. But I am not going to steal the show today because we have great panelists and guests who are here to just speak about this interesting topic. So I'd like to introduce Dawi, who is our chief of party, and he's going to kick us off and start off the Energy Cafe. Welcome, have a great time. We are recording this session, and even as we go along, please feel free to just put in your comments and any questions you have in the chat box, and we'll address them as we go along. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
Well, thank you, Juliet, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Pieterse. I'm the Chief of Party for the Power Africa East Africa Energy Program. I just want to check, you can hear me okay?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Good. Thank you so much. Well, I would like to start by welcoming everybody. First of all, the US Ambassador to Somalia, Ambassador Larry Andre, Mr. Naren Chabugam, the Director of the USAID Somalia Economic Growth Office, Mr. Mohammed Hassan, the Director of SIMMAD ILAB, our moderator and panelists, my fellow EAEP team members, participants, ladies and gentlemen. Ideally, these energy cafes would have been an in-person event somewhere and we could have a cup of coffee while we're doing this. But as you all know, we had to pivot to the virtual way of doing things. But that as it is, so I would like to welcome you this afternoon to this informal energy cafe. It is a forum that we designed to bring together key stakeholders as well as industry specialists to consider issues and discuss priorities, identify barriers, generate ideas, and create synergies across the energy sectors where we work. Today would be the first one that we do in Somalia. So I'm really proud and happy to be able to participate in this today. So this energy cafe was designed to foster in-country and regional opportunities for energy sector professionals and networks to gather, engage, matchmake, etc., to improve energy services delivery in East Africa. I'm not going to say too much about this anymore, but I would like to just give you a brief introduction to the East Africa Energy Program and just tell you about the work that we are doing in the region. So the East Africa Energy Program is a Power Africa project. It is fully funded by the United States Agency of International Development, USAID, and it is implemented by RTI International in partnership with several subcontractors. We aim to achieve the following 4 objectives, and these are just high-level objectives. I'm not going to bore you with all the details. So first of all is optimized power supply, basically bringing more megawatts to the networks in East Africa. And this program is an on-grid program. There's also an off-grid program that they have different priorities. The second area where we work is to increase grid-based power connections. That's basically bringing more people onto these grids in East Africa. The third area, and I think you've experienced some of this from our team in the past, is to strengthen utilities and other power sector entities. And typically we would do capacity building, we embed advisors at some of these utilities, etc. And the fourth area is cross-border energy training. As you know, all the nations in the East Africa region have very ambitious generation plans, and of course, looking for areas where they can send the energy. And that's where our work with the power pool and others are very important as well. We also promote gender equity, environmental mitigation and standards, and also community engagement. So that's some of the other areas where we work as well. But I think that's enough from me for now. I would like to now hand over to Mr. Mohammed Hassan. He's the Director of SIMMAD University Innovation Lab. So Mr. Hassan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time it is for you. First of all, please receive my greetings from SIMMAD University. I would like to convey our appreciation for this event in collaboration with RTI and USAID Somalia and And we would appreciate the presence of Larry Andre, the US ambassador to Somalia. For us, I'm Mohammed Musa Hassan. I'm the director of CIMAT iLab. CIMAT iLab is the innovation hub of CIMAT University. It's a university-based innovation hub. And what we basically do is we work in upskilling the youth. We mainly mentor the youth. We kind of incubate student startups. And we try to kind of create the options for employment in an environment like Somalia, where you have unemployment as one of the national challenges in the country. So instead of just depending on the normal employment, we try to build a culture of business for the youth. And we also try to produce freelancers, students that can work on their own without working for anyone. So these are the main things that we do. And in addition to this, we also work on building a local innovation system in Somalia. As you might know, the whole ecosystem is in its infancy stage in the country. And we're doing some basic interventions. For example, we have built some platforms like CAL, which is a crowdfunding platform in southern Somalia. We've also built Freelance, which is a digital freelancing platform that connects the local clients to the youth. We have also built CIMATX.com, which is a platform that connects the Somali youth to get employment opportunities in the USA, such as internships or working with other students in the USA universities. So that's a little bit of CIMAT iLab. We are very privileged that we're hosting this event today. As you might recall, previously we used to say like there are three main productive sectors in Somalia: the livestock, the energy, the fishery, and also the three main sectors basically. But now we are now coming to the realization that energy is another major productive sector for this country. And this is very, very important. And so the numbers also back up this. But unfortunately, Somalia has one of the lowest energy consumptions in sub-Saharan Africa. We rely on fuel, wood, and charcoal, and imported petroleum. They say like above 80% of our energy consumption comes from these sources. The energy accessibility is also another huge problem in the country. The rural areas do not have access to electricity. All the country, less than 20% of the population just has access to electricity. So these are unfortunate numbers, but if you look at what's happening and the opportunities available in the country, it shows that there is so much work to be done in this sector. For example, according to the African Development Bank Group, Somalia has the highest potential of any African country for onshore wind power. And so there is opportunity already available in the country. 50% of the country has wind speeds greater than 6 meters per second. So we're so happy that we're having this discussion today. And we're also so happy that we have the proper and right people on the panel. So we are very hopeful that this will be just the beginning of something bigger coming for the country. We are very hopeful that this will inspire more discussions, more policy recommendations from the panel, and then we are hopeful that this will become part of the agendas for the upcoming government. So back to you, David, and as CIMAT University, we are very proud that we are doing this with you guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Yes, as I said, we are excited to join you with this Energy Cafe, and I'm really happy that we can work together. I would now like to hand over to the USAID team. Naren and Ambassador Andre, over to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Ambassador Larry Andre to this important forum. This is Ambassador Andre's third ambassadorship. He was ambassador prior to this in Djibouti and Mauritania. He's got a long history with Africa, starting in 1983 with the Peace Corps in Senegal. Since then, he's served in a number of African countries in various capacities. And back in DC, he was the director of the Office of the Special Envoy of South Sudan and Sudan. So Ambassador Andre has vast experience with Africa. Furthermore, he's also familiar with Power Africa, having worked with them in Djibouti. And he's also got connections to Somalia prior to his ambassadorship, when he set up the Somalia Affairs Unit in 2007. And this unit became the US Embassy eventually. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Ambassador Andre. Thank you.
Well, hello, everyone. I appreciate how much getting increased energy use, production, consumption can mean for development. And I certainly understand how the very high prices here in the current economic context especially inhibit that. I was previously ambassador in Djibouti, which also has exceptionally high energy prices, but not quite as high as here. Before I make my remarks, the first thing I want to say is Hambalyo to Somalia's former and current president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. I had a very good conversation with him today, and amongst other topics, we discussed the energy sector and his policies for inclusive economic growth, economic development, and response to the humanitarian crisis that so many Somalis are facing right now as a result of this very terrible and long-lasting drought. But certainly the energy sector is something that he's aware of and is focused on. We had a good conversation today. So Hambalyo, Mr. President. Thanks to all of you joining us today, including our esteemed panel of representatives of financial institutions, Power Africa private sector partners, and electricity service providers from across Somalia. Today, we are gathered to discuss and learn more about the role of the private sector in Somalia. The Somali private sector is the lead provider of energy services. It has done so successfully despite the extremely challenging operating environment that Somalia presents. Somalia's energy needs are vast, with only 15% of households having access to electricity. The lack of affordable electricity is a key constraint to business growth and further development. With electricity costing an average of 60 cents per kilowatt hour, about 3 times that of neighboring Kenya and 6 times that of the United States, Somalia needs to reduce the cost of power generation, and that will greatly increase economic development, business development, prosperity. I am an optimist for Somalia. I see how ethnic Somali communities around the world are generally quite successful relative to the greater communities in which they find themselves. There's always individual exceptions, but as a community, ethnic Somali communities tend to do extremely well in countries around the world. I believe that once Somalia's revival begins to relieve Somalis of all of the burdens that they must labor under in terms of insecurity, unpredictable governance, that the wealth generation that we have seen ethnic Somali communities achieve elsewhere in the world what they will achieve at home. It is a culture that tends to produce people who are hard charging, hard working, and ready to achieve. We would like to challenge our partners in the energy sector, the government and local international companies, to increasingly meet Somalia's power needs by building on the existing strength and dynamism of Somalia's private sector, and to do so in an environmentally friendly way. Encouragingly, electricity service providers are starting to show interest in renewable energy solutions, such as integrating wind and solar to supplement increasingly costly to supplement a diesel and generation, which is the most common. We're seeing that diesel generation has become more and more costly due largely to the economic knock-on effects of Russia's disastrous invasion of Ukraine. Somalia has an abundance of solar and wind resources, and it is time to begin exploiting them. Again, in a supplemental way, certainly at first. The Somali government continues to develop its legal and regulatory framework to attract greater investment in the energy sector. A strengthened regulatory framework will support higher technical standards and reduce commercial losses over time. Currently, Somalia suffers from more than 40% technical and commercial losses. This wastes energy resources, costs customers and providers money, and poses safety concerns. Through the Power Africa initiative, the US government aims to support Somalia's energy sector stakeholders on this pathway. Together with electricity service providers, government ministries, and regulatory agencies, the regional power pool, and other international partners, Power Africa wants to help bring Somalia into the greater energy network, into the regional energy network. So I anticipate a robust discussion amongst the panel members and all of those participating today on how we can take Somalia's energy sector into the future. I believe that all participants will benefit from a robust discussion. So speak up, ask your questions, offer your ideas, and let's find a better future in the energy sector for the Somali people. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Wise words, and I'm sure that we will explore some of those during this afternoon session. And I think with that, I would like to hand it back to Shakur to introduce our moderator as a moderator as well as the panelists. So over to you, Shakur.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Dawi, and thank you, Ambassador Andre, and other esteemed panelists joining us today here. Julia, if you can maybe share the flyer of the panelists as I go through their introduction. Well, let me just quickly start by introducing myself. My name is Abdi Shakur Ahmed, and I lead Power Africa's East Africa Energy Program activities in Somalia. I'm the moderator of the discussion today, and it's really my pleasure to join this distinguished panel of experts and interact them and engage them on the subject that we're going to be discussing here today. Before I get into our discussion, I would like to quickly go over the agenda and the structure of the discussion so that we all know what to expect. I will start with a quick introduction of our panelists, and then we would move on to a sector background that one of our colleagues who is here with us today, Richard Morrison, will provide. After that, we will move on to the discussion. or the panel discussion, where I will be asking to our panelists a number of questions. You would also have the opportunity to ask some questions. So I would encourage our panelists to continue checking their chat box in case there are questions that are more relevant to our discussion today. And if I might quickly remind us what the discussion is about today, or what the topic is today, the topic covers or aims to address key opportunities and challenges for private investment in the Somali power sector. And after the panel discussion, every panelist will have a 2-minute to make any conclusions or cover areas that they didn't have enough time to address during the panel discussion. And finally, I will hand it over back to Dawi Peters, who would provide some closing remarks for our event. So with that, let me quickly introduce our panelists. We're really very honored to have Mr. Mohamed Dubbo here with us today. Mohamed Dubbo has over 15 years experience in the domains of communications, marketing, project management, and private sector development. He is currently the director of Somalia Investment Promotion Office at the Ministry of Planning, Investment, and Economic Development of the Federal Government of Somalia. Prior to this role, Mohamed Dubbo worked with the United Nations Somalia Communications Team as a deputy project manager. He also worked for the Ministry of Constitutional Affairs as a communications advisor and the Ministry of Justice as a strategic communications advisor. Before he joined public sector or public service, Mr. Dubbo was in the private sector in different capacity. Mr. Dubbo holds his bachelor's in communication and public relations and master's in communication studies from Moi University. He also holds his master's in contemporary diplomacy and digital governance from the University of Malta. Welcome, Mohamed, and really good to have you here today. We're also delighted to have Morayo Osiyemi on the panel. Morayo has over 20 years experience delivering technology solutions across diverse industries and sectors. She has spent the last 10 years working on transformative technology projects for utilities across Africa. In her current role as the Director of Utilities Business Development for Spark Meter, she is responsible for bringing Spark Meter's affordable and effective digitalization solutions and services to utilities across Africa and Asia Pacific regions. Morayo has her sight on transforming utilities with digitalization, making them more viable and effective in delivering safe and affordable electricity. Welcome, Morayo. We're also extremely grateful to have Joseph Abramowitz, who happens to be my former boss here today. Joseph Abramowitz has been nominated by 12 African countries for the Nobel Peace Prize for his solar energy work in Africa. He is named by CNN as one of the 6 leading green pioneers on the planet. Mr. Abramowitz is a founding partner of the US Power Africa program and serves as Chief Executive Officer for Gigawatt Global. Gigawatt Global is a frontier solar developer and independent power provider. Welcome, Joseph. Really good to have you as well.
Thank you.
We're excited to have Ayan Khalif with us today as well. Ayan is the Senior Property Development Manager at ML Bank, one of the leading banks in Somalia with branch offices in all major cities of Somalia. Prior to this role, Ayan worked in both the private sector and the public sector in Australia. Mrs. Khalif holds bachelor's in property economics, master's in urban planning, and master's in property development. Welcome, Ayan. Good to have you. We're also super excited to have Abdulrazak Ismail. Abdulrazak is the Chief Executive Officer of National Energy Corporation of Somalia, NEXM, one of the largest electricity service providers in Somalia and the sole electricity provider in Garowe, the regional capital of Puntland state of Somalia. Prior to his current role, Abdulrazak was the Chief Financial Officer of NEXM for about 10 years. Mr. Abdulrazak holds his bachelor's in business administration from Puntland State University. Thank you for joining us, Abdulrazak. And finally, we are happy to have our colleague, Richard Morrison, on the panel. Richard Morrison is a commercial advisor with over 20 years experience advancing with power stakeholders in sub-Saharan Africa. Richard worked in power project development as a project director and an advisor, Most recently, Richard has worked for Power Africa in Southern and East African regions. Since he started working in Somalia, Richard advised and trained teams from 15 power companies in Somalia. Richard has a first-class honors science degree in resources with postgraduate qualifications in law, economics, and finance. So with that introduction, I would like to quickly hand it over to Richard Morrison to give us a quick background and context of the Somalia power sector that will serve as a foundation for our discussion today. Hand it over to you, Richard.
Thanks, Shakur. I'll just get my presentation up. It's a bit of a challenge.
Richard, do you want me to share it?
Just give me a second, Julie. I think we get it now. I'm just trying to get in presentation mode. What do you think? Will that work?
You can see it, but maybe it's not in a presentation view.
Okay, that might be the best we can do.
It's okay.
All right. Yeah, we're underway now. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Yes, thanks. I want to recognize the ambassador in particular. I know the ambassador. I know he's up for a challenge. So thank you. I wanted to recognize quickly too USA, Power Africa, East Africa Energy Program, and thank them for investing in Somalia. It gave us a great opportunity for the work we're doing there, and it gave us the opportunity to employ Abdi Shakur. He's been a real shining light for our program. And obviously all the panelists and participants, thanks a lot. That's really appreciated. So yeah, in terms of the context, I wanted to relate a little bit of our experiences. We've been visiting Somalia now for over several visits. And I've got to tell you, it's a humbling experience because what we've seen is communities and businesses have got together and achieved, as the ambassadors pointed out, in quite challenging circumstances in developing power systems, power generation, power distribution. And so as private businesses have achieved so much. But when you talk to them as well, and we've met with obviously a number of them and met with their boards, and their focus is also quite enlightening in the sense that they're interested in things like training, capacity building, and it's not a normal sort of focus maybe you get sometimes from private businesses. They're just interested in the money they can make. These people are interested in developing the power sector and developing the people in the power sector. So yeah, it's a story of achieving a lot, as I said, in challenging circumstances. All the businesses, as most of you are aware, in Somalia are privately owned electricity supply businesses. There is no transmission systems yet, and so they're operated to serve the various population centers. And in doing so, the generation has been primarily thermal generation, high-speed or medium-speed diesel generation. It's expensive, as has been pointed out. The costs of fuel, the costs of getting the fuel to the sites, it's an expensive business. But the trend is positive in the sense that we have seen a number of solar installations going in, and battery energy storage is coming, and is in some cases already there. And the wind projects have also been, there's been some success in that area as well. On the power distribution side, the scale is a problem because with power distribution, if you can increase the scale, the costs come down considerably. Both technical and commercial losses are quite disturbing. Technical losses because sometimes the investment in the distribution sector has been a little bit on the light side and needs to be more emphasis probably on quality, but also there's a mixture of systems quite often. So you get a jumble of distribution systems because the power companies are competing in the same areas. That competition isn't always, it's not such a bad thing, but where you're competing with networks, it can get pretty messy, and there's advantages to having one network system. So that's an issue of competition, but which has been resolved a little bit by the trends towards consolidation, and a number of urban centres already have seen that consolidation occur, where businesses have combined to form one or two power companies instead of several. So that is a trend that we're observing. Again, the condition of the systems still needs to be, more work needs to be done there. The one thing I wanted to highlight was the focus on development, and it is a feature of the Somali power sector. Focus on continuing to build more network systems, more generation capacity, and more human capacity, as I alluded to. A lot of focus on training, and that's certainly been a focus on our contribution where we can to build capacity to provide training to support those initiatives. I want to talk a little bit before I finish on the strengths and the opportunities we perceive. And I see a question came up on green hydrogen as a fuel, which is potentially an opportunity in the future. And we could come back to that later. In terms of strengths, as has been mentioned, Somalia has great wind power potential and fantastic solar power potential. And in fact, it represents one of the highest combined potentials on the planet. And these diagrams or these illustrations give you an idea of that. You can see that the brighter the red or the brighter the orange, the better the resource, whether it be wind or solar. And although energy is a driver of economic development, energy is also increasingly in its own right, and it represents an opportunity for development around that energy source, not just for existing economic development, but in its own right. For instance, a cheaper energy resource is due to the emerging green hydrogen industry that the question came up about. So if you think of opportunities, the renewable energy potential for the power sector in Somalia stands out. It's one of the great opportunities and strengths. Just moving on, the other element that I wanted to briefly touch on was we've described the lack of transmission within the Somalia power sector. So transmission basically means joining up load centers and potentially joining up cities to other parts of the region. So currently there's no interconnection between, say, Ethiopia and Somalia or Kenya and Somalia. And there's no interconnection between the centers like in Kismayo and Mogadishu or Bosaso yet. This diagram, this map here shows some initial plans from the World Bank's Horn of Africa proposal. It's something the East Africa Energy Program is also working on, is to look at how we can support the development of transmission between some of the urban centres. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen in one big bang or even from one end of the country to the other. It can grow organically. whether it be through a connection with Ethiopia and then expansion, or whether it be joining up some of the larger centres in the south and north of the country. This is an opportunity that for Somalia's economic development and for the power sector that we want to see proceed, and we think that it will assist the power sector in the country going forward. So that's all I wanted to say at this stage. I'll pass it back to you, Shakur.
Thank you so much, Richard. I think that provides a good overview of the current power sector and what are the challenges and opportunities. So just to, I would like to start with Mohamed Dubo, the Director of Somalia Investment Promotion Office, by basically given how Richard has just highlighted that Somalia has enormous potential of renewable energy, specifically wind and solar. For the country to utilize that, definitely there is a private capital that's needed. So what do you think is the major significant barriers to international financing for the power sector? And do you think the diaspora could play a role in facilitating that investment?
Thank you very much, Abdushakur. Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I would like to recognize the presence of the U.S. Ambassador Larry, and I appreciate he's joining us today, which shows how the U.S. is committed to mainstream the energy sector in Somalia as much as possible. I would like also to commend the U.S. government, Power Africa, CIMAD Lab for organizing this online and important event. And I would really hope its continuation for us to discuss and engage in sector-related matters in order to progress and move forward. Back to your question, I think the opportunities offered by this sector are very enormous, from financing perspective, from technology supplier perspective, and perhaps from human capital development perspective. I would put those into those three broad areas, which are very interesting, and based on the data we have and the flow of foreign direct investments into the energy sector are focused into those three areas. Opportunities from the renewable energy, more specifically the solar systems, the wind turbines, and most recently the gas turbines, which are also making considerations into this market. So I think from that generation perspective, the country offers a lot of opportunities besides the climatic opportunities, or what we call national capabilities, in terms of the sunlight and the wind speed in most part of Somalia. Besides those national capabilities or existing sort of opportunities, I think there are also increasing demand thanks to the peace dividends, and most urban areas in Somalia are basically increasing the demand day in, day out. A lot of commercial activities, specifically light industries, manufacturing, are also picking up, which calls for more demand in the energy or the power consumption in the country. Having said that, I think the Somali diaspora have a very, very important role to play in the energy sector. As the federal government of Somalia, I think we have made the biggest commitment that we can prioritize the energy sector investments manifested in the National Development Plan, which outlines energy economic development as a major sector of focus. The same has been realized in the National Investment Promotion Strategy, which is in force from 2021 to 2024, which outlines or also mentions energy sector as top priority sector. At that juncture, I would like to note that the Somalia's productive sectors, basically livestock, energy, livestock, farming, and blue economy or fisheries, has been the traditional sources or the sectors of productive nature that most of the governments used to focus. But due to the energy infrastructure sort of depletion during the war, we have decided, actually those three became top as we were formulating the National Investment Promotion Strategy through the consultations of all stakeholders. But energy became fourth. So we decided, are we going to put the cart before the horse? And we came to the conclusion that we need to promote more investment into the energy sector as critical enabling sector, which also has the success key of the other productive sectors, as I have mentioned. So I think it has become through the consultations as a priority area number 4 or priority sector number 4, but through the implementation of the strategy, we decided to make it the first sector to be given more priorities. The same thing is also happening at the growth and economic transformation strategy, which is being written. The data so far I think suggests that energy sector is a top priority, and GETS, or the growth and economic transformation strategy, is basically a vision for 2020 that Somalia's aspirations of development in the medium, short, medium, and the long term are captured. So in this context, I think the diaspora has a lot of role to play. I need to appreciate and recognize the Somali diaspora's historic role in livelihoods and small businesses support in Somalia throughout the past 30 years. We also recognize that diaspora remittance flow to Somalia is close to $2 billion, which is very, very important contribution to the Somali economy. However, we note that a very gradual shift of conversion from livelihood and small business support to our more medium business and large corporations, startup or capital injection for that matter, into the areas of productive sector as well as the enabling sector, chief among them the energy sector. So I think that trend, which is increasing as per our data, is very crucial, and it shows how the diaspora are getting in touch or getting involved in the energy sector development. Cognizant also the fact that the diaspora are not only sending about money, but they also hold significant experiences, knowledge, skills, and know-how as far as this energy sector is concerned. So I think in the long run, if we have that kind of diaspora investments and involvement in the Somali economy, I think what's remaining is just aligning those efforts with the global ongoing environmental and climate change efforts to make sure that the renewable energy sector is well invested, so that we don't repeat the same mistakes maybe other countries recovering from long civil war have gone through, and also leapfrogging sort of. We need to start new technologies and the latest technologies where it stands, rather than reinventing the wheel. So I think with those few remarks, I would like to end answering your question.
Thank you. Thanks, Mohammed. It's good to see the priority that the government is giving the sector. With the same question, I would like to ask Joseph from Gigawatt Global. Given that the diaspora is investing, the government is prioritizing the sector, and there's a huge potential, what is holding back investors like Gigawatt Global, and what do you see as a barrier in the Somali market?
Well, thank you very much. First, I want to say hello to our ambassador. One of the reasons we're willing to consider a significant investment really is because you're there on the ground, you understand what's going on, and you could help guide us. We would never on our own be able to navigate the many, many challenges. And the fact that you're there and you have your experience helps us out. And also I want to kudos to AID Empower Africa for having people on the ground. I agree that Abdi Shakur is a shining light, whoever said that before. We've been tracking Somalia now for many, many years. And We've been trying to find the right formula to be able to make a difference and make a significant investment. We're not interested in sort of the small investments, and everything that we've seen has been very small and piecemeal. I could tell you what would attract us and where we would put our money, including the United States government money, in a major way. And perhaps, post-election and now with this kind of prioritization, you'd be able to do it. I think the notion of the power pools is a mistaken 20th century notion. What we see for Somalia, the right thing, is regional grids, just regional, not even microgrids, but anything from micro to large city grids, and that. Because the government is not really a player, we understand about all the different companies, and we do think the consolidation is helpful. But Richard's right. If all these installations are relatively small, you are not benefiting from the economies of scale. So the way we would do it is what we did in Rwanda. In Rwanda, we said to the electric company, listen, there's only 20% electrification in this area. We'll take care of generation with solar. You focus on interconnection. So we did, supplying 6% of the country's power, and they took their electrification from 20% in the region up to 80%. Here's the deal, power companies. We would come in, and to do something relatively large, 50, 100 megawatts, we'll do the generation, the solar, wind, storage. If you'll put in an order, and instead of asking us to align with one or the other, that let's separate out the generation. You won't be able to do the generation as well and as cheaply as we can because of our experience. I've done 17 utility scale solar installations. So if we knew that we could be a central generator and that you would focus on the distribution, on the interconnections, right? Someone's representing a metering company, hopefully smart meters along those lines, then that would be attractive. We'll get the price down. But we won't do it if you're not passing along the savings to the people, because otherwise there won't be the economic development. So if you're at 60 cents a kilowatt hour, right? And we're going to come in over here, we don't want you to charge the customers 60 cents because it won't spur the economic development. So if we knew that we had scale, that we had several off-takers, and we're not being asked to play any favorites, same price, transparent price. And if we knew you were passing along a hefty amount of the savings, then working with the ambassador and USAID, we would be honored to be that central generator.
Thanks, Yusuf. So the same question to Ayan Khalif from ML Bank. From the local perspective, as a local bank that's operating in Somalia, what do you see as a significant barrier to investment in the power sector, Ayan?
Hi, thanks, Ahmed Abdishkur. Firstly, I'd like to thank the ambassador for joining and also the panelists for the contribution and moving not just this sector forward, but Somalia as a whole. To answer your question, Ahmed, I think from a local perspective, particularly being a local bank in Somalia, we have the typical, barriers that are associated with investing or international investment in Somalia: security, political uncertainty, government policy. But the biggest, I would say, in terms of barriers is the lack of information, so access to information and data, comparable information in terms of businesses. There is, I would say, we still have, from the bank's perspective, we see quite a lot of we see quite a bit of development in terms of organizations developing and getting consultancies for, if we say the energy sector, moving the business forward. But we don't see in terms of financial, the projections, the financial analysis, the modeling that goes along with the other areas of business development. A little bit earlier was mentioned the energy consumption of Somalia being a bit low. It would be, I would say the energy consumption is directly associated
Ayan, I think you want mute. Can you hear us? It looks like we lost Ayan. Ayan, can you hear us? Are you in the call with us? Okay, in the meantime, I would like to quickly ask or bring in National Energy Corporation of Somalia, NEXUM's CEO. Given that, our panelists has highlighted a major concern as the business practices and the readiness for investment for local utilities, how do you think NEXUM can align its best practices to that of international investors? And what do you think the government's role would be in the long term for achieving the partnerships that you seek with international investors?
Thank you for all of you. I am very glad to receive the invitation to attend this high-level forum. Thank you all of the panelists. I think you hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If I try to answer that question, I think the first period is security. Security is a biggest challenge that having this opportunity. The government is the biggest player in terms of ensuring security in the country. Without security, the proper service provision is not possible, leading to poor service, which finally adversely affected the economy and those living under it. Lack of security has become the major concern for foreign investors who are willing to invest the country, but couldn't do to fear for their.
Sorry, please continue. Some people are unmuted. Nicholas, if we might unmute people who are not muted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the first point that I wanted to highlight, according to the government role, the government is the biggest player in terms of ensuring security in the country. Without security, the proper service provision is not possible to leading to the poor service, which finally adversely affects to the economy and those living under it. Lack of security has become the major concern for foreign investors who are willing to invest into the country, but couldn't do to the fear for their funds and lives. If proper service were to be provided to enhance the lives for those governing, the government must ensure peace and security in the country. Number two, I think it is a lack of regulation. It's the biggest. The electricity provision service is one of the highest regulating industry in the world. Unfortunately, that is not the case in Somalia. This is a little regulation, if any, in Somalia. This has forced many electricity service provider coming up with their own way for handling certain practice due to the lack of proper regulation. Such practices work at times and they don't in other times. Regulation are not supposed to be seen as something that the government use to burden electricity service provider. Instead, it should be appreciated that regulation serve both electricity service provider and society in which they serve. I think that's the two points, and point number three that I wanted to highlight, as I mentioned earlier, lack of security has become the major concern for foreign investors. That is true. However, at times when the issue of security is handled For example, through the use of insurance and foreign investor fees, other challenges for lack of foreign investment policy. That is very, very important in place. The government therefore should put in place foreign investment policy so that it is that attention that Somalia is not worth investing in. Number 4, work towards the interest of its society. That is the very, very important. At times, the government officials might try to looking for personal interest in grants and similar funds from international bodies. For those involved in such acts, they must know that such funds were made to ease the lives of society through cheaper electricity. For example, if funds are not managed as per donor requirements in the best interest of those involved, then the result will be lose-to-lose situation, where donor objectives will not be met. A society will not benefit from what they had rights on, and the electricity service provider will miss the opportunity to expand its service provision and also reduce the tariff. I think in that question, to minimize that on only 4 points. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abdul Saad. I think I would like to before I call Mohammed Dubo, who is not necessarily represent for the Ministry of Energy, but for the Ministry of Planning and Investment Promotion. Before I bring him in, I would like to quickly ask Richard Morrison, given the elements that Nexum just highlighted in terms of security and incomplete regulatory framework, how do you think the ESPs can move forward, maybe with incomplete regulatory framework and not completely secure environment?
Yeah, thank you, Shakur. I think, firstly, I would say that the power sector is in a stage of development. They've reached a point where they're moving to the next phase. And I think investors are now looking at the region and saying, look, despite what they might have had concerns in the past, sometimes those concerns about security, I feel like they're becoming less. So I think the time is right. I also think it's an opportunity for something a little bit innovative in how we address the power sector development in Somalia. And as we know, to date, the development has been largely the purview for the private sector, and the private sector have done exceptionally well with what they've been able to achieve. To go to the next stage, so there does need to be a cooperative overall oversight with government involved to ensure that the different parts of the country can coordinate and if necessary, the region as well. But I don't feel like we've got enough time to wait for the legislation, the regulations, the policy, everything to be lined up, everything to be finalized. And I don't think you need to wait. I think there are plenty of examples where the private sector and the government coordinate, power sector players and government coordinate to lead the development of the industry. And I think that's the window we're looking at here in Somalia. So I could see something which you could call a sector development unit, some kind of cooperative body, which includes the government, which includes the power sector current players, which includes the power sector investors, which includes the leadership from the community, the elders. So they're all part of it. And then, you know, development organizations like ourselves can provide resources, but, you know, not leading the direction. That needs to come from the country itself. But I feel like if those groups can get together, government and the sector and the various community organizations that are relevant, and form this development unit, form this development grouping, then they can take the industry forward. And then the legislation regulations can catch up. The standardization of the legislation provides you and the rules that regulation is required can be done in this cooperative way. They don't have to be written in black letter on the legislation and the regulations straight away. They need to be documented, they need to be sorted out. But the policy, legislation, regulative process, I think that's going to be too slow. I think the sector participants need to get together and take this forward. And then if you have external parties, international investors, international developers wanting to be part of this, they can have agreements with this unit. They can then sign agreements that the government will underwrite and the power sector, electricity buyers will underwrite based on a code that's agreed with this unit. So I feel like there's an opportunity here to take Somalia to the next level, but not to wait too long for delay things. I think the sector needs to get together and all the participants need to get together and create what would be what we describe as the enabling environment for power sector development. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Mohammed Dubo, how do you think the government can still support electricity service providers or utilities despite incomplete regulatory environment while ensuring that they still thrive while the regulatory framework is complete? What do you think? How do you think we can achieve the coordinations and collaboration that Richard Morrison has just outlined, for example?
Thank you, Abshakur. I would like to little bit go back to the security aspects. I think a colleague has over-mentioned the security aspect as a major barrier to foreign investments. Working as an investment promotion in charge of the country's investment promotion office, I think the major issues are regulatory and institutional related issues rather than security. I believe more US and EU companies, energy companies, are investing in Tripoli, Libya, than they are investing in Mogadishu, Somalia. So I don't know which one is which one, the security or the regulatory and the overall environment. But having said that, I think there are also options for investors who are well concerned with the security aspects. Either they can do offshore power generation. They can also do what we call brownfield investments, where they can develop partnerships with domestic players, energy providers, and other utility companies. So there are many ways to bypass the security mindset, although I don't see security as a major obstacle today. I think the major obstacle is the government's pace and rate of energy sector regulatory and institutional reforms. That has been quite lagging behind. I must admit that. A lot of legal gap analysis could have been done earlier on to either propose the introduction of new legislations or also amending the existing inconsistent articles of various laws that either act as barrier or somehow limit the growth of the sector. Coming back to the question of the private sector government coordination in the absence of strong regulatory environment, I think the private sector has grown exponentially much stronger than the public sector during the wartime. The private sector has not been in recognizing the fact that there is a public sector which can contribute to their growth of various sectors. I think that realization has come recently, and most of the companies are either pushing now the government to speed up the rate and pace of reforms, or are even contributing financially to introduce certain legislations that they think will be enhancing the overall growth of the sector, but most importantly, their own companies. So I think that realization will definitely foster a very joint coordination framework. And I think the recent electricity bill at the cabinet and how it was widely consulted, and the role of the private sector in all major government undertakings and policy formulations is at a very encouraging pace. What I would suggest is just the public sector or the government rather to upscale the reform rate, so that at least a major holistic sector legal gap analysis can be undertaken as soon as possible to allow proper coordination, formal sort of coordination forums and units with that brings together all stakeholders, not only the private sector and the government, but also the consumer bodies and other interested parties. So I think the realization is there, the formation and the closer collaboration between the private sector and the government is just picking up, which is a very encouraging momentum.
Thank you, Mohammed. Definitely a closer collaboration from ESPs and the government would be the best approach for this. There are some regional companies that are specifically targeting structures or power structures like Somalia, and that is Spark Meter, for example. Spark Meter, represented by Morayo Asiemi here today, provides grid management solutions to off-grid companies, pretty much like ESPs that operate in Somalia. Morayo, I would like to ask, despite all these circumstances around the enabling environment, the regulatory framework, and technical challenges, how do you think the technology that Spark Meter is offering would help Somalia leapfrog the energy revolution that has been taking place in other parts of the continent or the world?
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Thanks, Shakur, for the introduction. And look, just to say a big thank you to the Power Africa, East Africa team, the CIMAD Innovation Lab, for having me on this panel. And yeah, I'm pretty honored to be on the panel with some very big heavy lifters. So yeah, I mean, in terms of opportunities, I had the privilege to spend some time in Somalia recently, and you know, observed, I mean, the amazing work that the ESPs are actually doing there. And when I sat down and listened to the history from where they started to where they are now, it's pretty amazing what has happened and the things that they actually have in their pipeline. In terms of technology, considering, you know, I've heard pricing being an issue, lack of data, you know, being an issue. So, for example, for investors, and losses being a major issue. And in terms of technology, this is where we have Internet of Things technology. It has become cheaper, has become readily accessible and available, especially in the decentralized model. When you add cloud computing to this, it makes it further accessible to utilities that in the past, only large utilities with maybe hundreds of thousands of customers or millions of customers could benefit from the economy of scale. But when you put together IoT technology, you bring together cloud computing, and you put analytics on top of that, utilities from as small as 5,000 customers can actually benefit from the same technology that the bigger utilities in the past would only benefit from. So we see Spark Meter playing a big role in that, and we'll be working with some of the ESPs that we met with when we're there in February in the future. Another thing I think will be digital payments. Digital payments, I think, will be a big opportunity for utility for the ESPs in Somalia. If you look at the leapfrog for a lot of countries in maybe Asia, in sub-Saharan Africa, when it comes to mobile technology, we moved away from fixed line, and some countries did not even go through fixed line and went straight to mobile technology. We're seeing the same thing with digital payments. So with IoT technology, cloud computing, analytics, digital payment, we see the opportunity for utilities to digitalize their core business processes, starting with things like smart metering. With smart metering, Gigawatt, you know, mentioned smart metering. As they bring in new technologies, you need to have instrumentation on the field, collecting data to give you real-time access to information. When you start with smart metering, all of this data starts coming in. We're hearing technology companies speak about digital twin now. So digital twin for system operations is digitalizing the entire physical space of a utility and bringing it into the virtual, so that you actually have information as you need it from the field. You can run models, you can run simulations without actually committing to big infrastructure in future. But in terms of some of the specific challenges like losses, smart metering, for example, will go a long way because it helps you digitalize your meter to cash process very quickly. And this is where we start seeing savings that instead of losing 40 cents for every dollar that you invest, you can claw back all that money, and that can be passed on to the consumers. Which is what, when we spoke to some of the ESPs, was some of the feedback they gave us that, hey, we're looking at technology to improve our operations, to cut down on the losses, so that we can actually pass on the savings to on the pricing to the consumers. And some of the things that get overlooked sometimes, which I was very excited to hear from utilities in ESP, is the customers, how the customers feel about the ESPs, and digitalizing, streamlining processes, giving customers more information, even about their own usage, will go a long way to reduce customer apathy. And with that, we expect to start seeing better uptake, trust between the ESPs and the customers. And I think with that, you can see that improvement, in the losses that we typically see is endemic for utilities in sub-Saharan Africa. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of technology, there's a whole raft of opportunities open to the ESPs, and then we hope that as Spark Meter, we'll be able to work with them in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mariah. It's good to see that you're taking a leading role in transforming the power sector here. Joseph, quickly, knowing that companies like Spark Meter are going into the sector, providing the technological innovation needed to improve the infrastructure, how do you think Gigawatt Global can be part of that to help Somalia leapfrog extensive infrastructure?
Thank you. Look, the metering is really important because you have to be able to provide a good case that about the bankability. In other words, if you have an ability to monitor, to collect, that's the basis for bringing debt and equity into the country and to be able to invest. I do want to go back to a previous comment. Look, physical security actually is number one. And I'll tell you what we need on a regulatory basis, which will include the meters, but the physical security is number one. And that's one of the other reasons why to have a focused one location. It's much easier to defend one location than dozens of small or medium locations. And you can add the cost of that security into that one physical location. But on a regulatory basis, what we want is a different kind of security, right? From the government, we need to know, how do we get a concession, right? We need to know that you accept the smart metering and the hopefully the mobile money related to that. And we want to know about guarantees, meaning the securities around that. So if you have 10,000 smart meters, which on average are making this up, $100 a month, then we're able to build an economic model to be able to figure this out. But let's not beat around the bush. Security is the main thing. We're working in northern Nigeria right now. And look, we have to be able to face it, but you can't dismiss it, not only because of us. We're willing to take that risk in most cases. But when we go back to the United States Development Finance Corporation, the Biden administration is interested in giving us 70% financing for Somalia. That's a big deal. Where some of the next couple of days will be good and there'll be greater clarity. But we have to be able to pass. There's going to be a security expert that they're going to depend on. And if the security expert nixes it, then we can't bring the financing. So don't underestimate how important the physical security is and the financial securities. And we love the smart metering to be able to help make the case that these are bankable power purchase agreements.
Thanks, Yosef. Mohammed Dubbo, as we know, a lot of the major electricity providers in Somalia are a product of a merger of many small mini grids, and there has been a lot of successes to that. Do you think the government should continue incentivizing the merger of ESPs in major cities? Mohammed, could you hear me? I'm not sure if we have Mohammed with us. I think in the meantime, why don't I direct that question to Abdul Razak from National Electric Company, Nexum. I know that ESPs continue merging, and I know that Nexum operates in different locations. Do you think this is something that the private sector prefers to continue? Abdul Razak?
Yes, can you repeat it?
Yes, so the question is, as you might know, for example, Banadr Electric Company is a product of many small mini grids that merge. So similar as SunPower in Hargeisa. So do you think this is a good trend for the power sector? You know, do you think ESPs continuing merging is a good thing? Is that something that Nexum would like to support in the future?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. According to my point of view, that is all the private sector is the same, either Hargeisa or Mogadishu. So I think it's yes.
Good question, a good answer, sorry. Richard Morrison, I think we talk a lot about this, specifically how that is going to somehow lead to some sort of a transmission backbone that would enable the country to either import power from neighboring countries or trade power internally. Do you think the government should support that? Do you think the stakeholders in the sector should continue encouraging merger?
Yeah, thanks, Shakur. I think, as I alluded to before, I feel like the government is trying now to become more active in the sector, and we've heard that energy is now the #1 priority in some of the national development plans, which is fantastic because, you know, we believe it. We believe it's probably the most important thing that can create economic development. And so the government is trying to get back into the sector, and we've also heard that the private sector is now saying, well, we recognize there's a role for government, but as I alluded to before, I think there's an opportunity that this is done in a cooperative way. Neither party can force the other party to be involved, and so consultation is important, but also participation of all the key sectors. So that's the community with the elders. That's the private sector as power companies, it's the private sector as investors, and the government. And people have mentioned the community as power buyers, of course. So collectively, they need to look at this and decide, okay, how can we then take it to the next level, which I think does mean interconnection. And that might mean 1 or 2 urban centers, or it could be something like Joseph is talking about, having a major generation development, major in Somali terms, and then sourcing several urban centers from that major development center, because we need the economies of scale to create a price that's reasonable, so the cost of power can drive the economy. And in some parts of Somalia, that could also include interconnection, because places like Ethiopia are creating power, selling power for, you know, a lot less than the price of power in Somalia. So I think it needs to be done in a cooperative, organized way between the parties. And I think I wanted to pick up too on Joseph mentioned concessions, because, you know, in the absence of the legal and regulatory framework we have, that we need agreements with credible counterparties, which means agreements with government and agreements with power off-takers, representing essentially the consumer group. They basically capture all the money from consumers, so they're credible, financially credible, and business-wise credible counterparties. And clearly the government needs to have a role to provide confidence to the investors. Now, because the legal and regulatory framework is relatively underdeveloped, the agreements we have with government need to step in there, so that a government concession would say a business like Gigawatt Global would encompass things that maybe you wouldn't necessarily normally see in a concession, but they fill the gaps. They fill the gaps in a way that the investor has confidence and the government is giving what they're comfortable to give in the absence of the fully developed legal and regulatory framework. And so I think coming back to your question on how the development will work, it really has to be done in a way that works for Somalia in a cost-effective way, but in a coordinated way. Yeah, I think that's enough on that from me. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. I'm not sure if we still have Mohammed Dubo. It would have been, Mohammed, are you with us? It would have been really nice to get the government perspective on this.
Yes, I got disconnected.
Thanks, Mohammed. So the question we asked while you were away was, you know, a lot of ESPs or utilities or electricity suppliers has been merging, and as you know, companies like Beko and SunPower, who happen to be the largest electricity service providers in Somalia, are a product of many grids that merged. Is that something the government would like to continue supporting and incentivizing?
Thank you, Abshakur. I don't think we have yet developed domestic investments incentive program, but we are in the process of formulating foreign and diaspora investment incentive policy. It's still in drafting stage. We have done the draft 0, and we are heading to the consultation phase. I need to brief this gathering that the energy sector has been earmarked as a strategic sector which will receive more incentive packages just to attract further new technologies and also to attract large-scale investments in this particular crucial sector. So we are incentivizing from fiscal and non-fiscal perspective. The Somali government relies heavily on tax generation, but we are also determined to attract more investment. So we have to give a little bit of fiscal sort of breaks, tax breaks, import duty exemptions, particularly the renewable energy equipments and technologies. There is no way we should be taxing solar panels same way we are taxing the automobiles. So that is something we are really looking at, and also incentivizing diaspora investments, particularly when they are moving back their equipments, technologies back home. They shouldn't be receiving taxes and all that. So we are in the process of doing that. Thankfully, we have a new government now. Once the cabinet is formed in the next 2-3 months, we will be able to table this through the cabinet so that we have a policy in place that focuses generally on the foreign investment incentive framework, but more specifically on the energy sector, specifically the renewable energy equipments and technologies. Thank you.
Thanks, Mohammed. Do we have Ayan from Amal Bank with us? Okay, I would like to get a quick input from Mariah on the same question. Mariah, in terms of markets, what does this mean to technology providers like SparkMeter when ESPs merged? Is that something that brings more opportunities? That's something that you would like to see more? What would be your perspective as a technology provider?
Yeah, I think based on some of our findings, when we visited, where you have the same utilities competing maybe in the same space, I think definitely there is the opportunity for economy of scale. But like I said, because technology is becoming a bit more, I guess, decentralized in its own, which means that you can run a small business and have the same technology as a large company. So the opportunity is always there for the small utilities or the large utilities regardless. But in terms of, as we see, consolidation happening across the utilities, digitalization actually then plays a stronger role because you have disparate systems coming together. If you support the fact that you may have different physical systems or different physical models because of the structure of Somalia, say because of different customer profiles, so you have to deal with those customers differently, or you have different energy sources coming in to the same network, or you have different landscape. This is where your digitalization really comes into play, because when you digitalize, you abstract all of the things that are happening on the physical layer. The physical layer, there might be restrictions in what you can or cannot do. But when you digitalize and then you abstract what is happening on the digitalization side away from what is happening on the physical side, then utilities then are empowered to continue to make decisions, have the right data, have the right insight, regardless of the physical layer on the distribution side. You're going to see a transition from diesel to include solar, to include wind. But if you've got your systems, your processes digitalized, if you've got your analytics already in place, focused on the outcome of the business, regardless of your energy sources, regardless of where your customer is, regardless of the type of customer, whether they're residential or commercial or large power users, then this is where technology comes into its own to support that transition. As the utilities either go through change of energy sources or expands in terms of energy access, or include different energy sources. I mean, we're probably going to start seeing electric vehicle usage coming up. This is one of the areas where leapfrogging could potentially happen for Somalia that we expect to see, and the systems that they have in place should and will be able to support it with the technology out there.
Thanks, Mariah. Joseph, when you hear a lot of ESPs or utilities are merging, what would that mean for IPPs or investors like you, specifically that you mentioned in terms of addressing the security question? You said it's easier to deal with one entity rather than many entities or having many different systems in different locations. Does consolidation of ESPs create more opportunities for investors like you and Gigawatt Global?
Thank you. Look, I think competition is good for the Somali people. Because I think it should be a race about interconnections. Like that's the thing. Because the more people who are connected, the greater the economic development. And so, we want to say we don't want to over consolidate, because once you have monopolies, it's also going to be bad. So let there be not too many players. Like for us to do 2, 3, 4 different off-taker agreements from a generation perspective, because we can invest in generation, in green generation and an inexpensive generation. But if there's going to be so many different ones, it's different. But we'd rather talk to the government and say we want one location, one that we can secure with them, in a cooperative way, in a physical way, and plan out, let's call it the grids, to go in to interconnect to the various different companies that are distributing. So consolidation is good, but beware what happens when monopolies hit. And I think you've been blessed with all the energy you need, truly. We saw, Richard just glanced over it, but the solar and the wind mapping is extraordinary, I'm not sure about the electric vehicles, but I think the electric motorbikes certainly can take off very, very, very quickly in Somalia as well. But you're gonna need to stabilize market, show both the guaranteed security, the financial securities, as well as the physical security along the way. Everyone can save money and make money, but I would rather say there's one price, and maybe the government has to tell us the price. Maybe that's the role of the government. And I know Mohammed, I don't know if you're still on. I'm always afraid of government telling me what the price is. On the other hand, if you're about to release all these regulations and tax benefits, maybe for those of us who have expressed interest, you can show us a draft and we can give you feedback. And I'll even tell you if the price is too high, by the way, that will be our commitment, along there. And I do think time is a factor. Like you may even want to structure it where the first 50 megawatts are at this price, and the second, and after, let's say everything works well, and the second 50 megawatts, there's lower risk, and so maybe that price can come down even more. So it's going to be now about leadership, and again, I hope the U.S. mission, working with the government and the investment people in the government, can create what Richard called, I feel it was a roundtable or some sort of way where we can access. But we can't go running around Mogadishu trying to meet each of you and everybody wants to do the bazaar, and maybe the government needs to tell us the price, but after consulting with us.
Thanks, Joseph. This is going to be the final question, and I think all panelists will have a time to answer to this question. But I would like to first slightly put in a different way for Nexum, because I think from the work that we're currently doing under East Africa Energy Program, we know that a lot of ESPs are busy with expansion plans, whether it is generation or network. How Nexum would like to see stakeholders like investors, technology providers, development partners be part of this generation development and expansion plans of Nexum? What support would you like to receive? How can stakeholders or development partners or investors be part of this ongoing expansion plans that utilities like Nexum is currently undergoing?
Thank you, Shakur. And I think according to the private sector, the whole company of Somali private sector are in the largest city like Mogadishu, Garowe, Bosaso, Galkayo, and there is a small village and rural area. They can't go far because it is a high cost. And they don't want it to incur the project like that without profit. So in the city or large city like Garowe, Bosaso, Hargeisa, Mogadishu, there's no problem according to the expansion. If a company makes expansion like Nexum, sometimes there is a IDBs, the IDBs, they can't, even if we make a lot of investment into the IDBs area, they can't pay the fees, and there is no subsidiary. So I think if we get support from any either government or international whatever it is, if we get any grant, we can reduce the tariff or the price. But all the company are investing their own network, transmission, distribution, and all this, and also generation. And I think the vital role which is missing is we have to get national grid. The government must be support that how we can make the national grid. If free company or even the neighborhood countries, they can produce kilowatt through the national grid. So we have to think not only the people who already access the electricity, but the people who cannot get the electricity, how the electricity reach out to the large cities. I think maybe my answer is not clear, but in Garowe, Hargeisa, Mogadishu, there is no problem according to the network and the transmission. But outside of the largest cities, we have to think that how that people can get the access of electricity to learn and also security and the small business.
Thank you, Abdulrazak. And I will come back to Mohammed Dubbo to see if the government can subsidize these expansion plans in order to expand energy access and reduce energy tariffs. But I would like to quickly ask Richard, what do you think would be the role of companies like SparkMeter and Gigawatt Global in supporting and also local commercial banks in supporting the expansion efforts that we have seen on the ground?
Yeah, I'm going to come to that, but I wanted to answer something else first. I think, you know, we talked about aggregating, ideally aggregating distribution businesses, and I take Yosef's point. You know, everybody hates a monopoly until they've got one, and you know, in many urban centers in Somalia, it's quite amazing. Different part of the world, unique in some ways. There isn't monopolies because you can have power from 2 or 3 different ESPs. Quite incredible. But of course, you know, the community is paying for 3 different wires coming into the, and it's so normally, you know, people say that's a natural monopoly, the poles, wires, and transformers. In Somalia, the way the power sector's evolved, it's not that way, but probably it needs to be. And in that case, either some kind of, the government could step in and provide concessions, or some kind of public-private partnership could come in and buy all the networks and you know, regulate them in a way. But you could also have energy competition. And coming back to your point, how the people like SparkMeter could be involved, I think, given that Somalia's leapfrog in some parts of the world in terms of the way they compete for electricity, if you do go back and say, okay, the poles, wires, transformers are a natural monopoly, but there's an opportunity to have electricity trading, which is something I wouldn't normally expect to say about a developing economy, but maybe that's there. And a company like SparkMeter could innovatively provide the platform for something like that happening. If I'm asked to address questions about generation development companies, I think the answer to how they could get involved, I think we really heard it from Joseph. He needs credible counterparties on the other side, and those credible counterparties need to have the support from the sector, the government, the community. And we need, as a development community, to support them, to provide generation developers with a basis for contracting, a basis for getting agreement that gives them the security they need, not just for security, but also for financial security. And, you know, when you come in and you build a generation power station, it's a leap of faith because it's going to last for 20 years. You build it over maybe a year, and then it maybe takes you 10, 20 years to get paid for it. So you can see there's a commitment, there's quite a leap of faith involved. So I think coming back to Somalia has to put that framework out there that will entice the investment community through the sort of mechanisms that we've discussed at this forum. Thanks.
Thanks, Richard. I felt like I just asked you this question on behalf of SparkMeter and Gigawatt Global, but I would also like to hear from their own perspective. How can they be part of this ongoing effort of expansion? So let me start with Gigawatt Global, Yosef.
First, I just want to say, good for Somalia. Look at this conversation. You can feel the potential. I think no one's naive about the challenges, and yet it must happen. Like this is the way forward. And I do think, you know, Richard's comment that maybe Somalia is even unique in the world in many respects. But you have the energy resources, use them. You have the need, the human need, and there's a relationship, of course, between energy and also water, right? Whether it's desalination or pumping or transmission, which is related, of course, to agriculture, which really should be one of the foundational pieces of your economy, and the food security or the food insecurity is so great for so many people in your country. So this is an imperative. And so we as impact investors, we want to be partners, but we can't make crazy investments. We can make, cutting edge but not bleeding edge investments. So help us, right? Help us. We don't know the politics between the different, energy companies and stuff, but if you gather and as a group, you say, okay, we want to order 100 megawatts in stages. If the government says, okay, we understand you need certain kinds of guarantees to do it, we'll make a deal, essentially. And we don't want to be undercut at the finish line. Also, this has happened in several markets where all of a sudden the government will lead us on. So I'm just letting you know, full disclosure. And at the end, they'll say, okay, we want to go to bid. No, if you're asking for us to hold your hand, right, as frontier developers, to be able to take risk, a lot of risk, like physical risk, financial risk with you, we need to know upfront we have a concession. And there are milestones. We could lose that concession if we don't meet the milestones, not if you don't meet the milestones. So let's map this out together in a reasonable way. And our investors, the first couple of years, the price will be high because they need to get their money back and out relatively quickly because it is Somalia, right? But it doesn't mean there isn't the market here. And between the smart meters, between the absolute need, between the, some consolidation in the market, but if you need food, you need energy. If you need water, you need energy. If you want economic growth, you need energy. So work with us, understand what our needs are. And if you really are willing to come to the table in a rational and organized way, we're here for you. And so is the Biden administration. The Development Finance Corporation is targeting fragile states. The legislation targets fragile states. The World Bank actually has a fragile state facility. They will trust us as developers to be able to navigate this, but we can't do it unless we know that there are serious partners on the other side. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joseph. If you can, thank you so much. I think we're also a little over time, and there is a great discussion and comments going on in the chat box. Unfortunately, we will not be able to address that now, but we will definitely keep that record and get back if there are areas that we would want to get back on. So I would like to bring in Mario, but I think you're also a little over time. So maybe if you can answer to this question, which was how can Spark Meter be part of this ongoing expansion effort? At the same time, maybe make your final closing remarks as we get close to the end of the session. Thank you, Mario.
Yeah, thanks, Shako. I think in terms of closing remark, the recommendation is that utilities should start now with the taking on their technology and leveraging the existing technologies, whether it's digital payments that's already in place, partnering with the banks to even put things in like deduct at source so that their commercial is viable and they have bankable projects. Joseph mentioned that this is a big part of it. At the end of the day, somebody has to pay for the electricity that's generated, transmitted, and that is a big focus for utilities moving forward. In terms of Spark Meter, we're quite happy to work with the utilities, small and large scale. There is also an opportunity for capacity development locally in Somalia that we see. There's that opportunity to localize support services in terms of technology that is deployed in Somalia. And, that goes back to also towards, creating jobs and giving stronger support for those services to be operationalized in Somalia. And also in terms of, as we see larger scale, deployments, we come in with our financing, that we have a capability to bring in financing, from development banks that are quite happy to also support this type of projects because they see that this is something that underpins the economic development in Somalia. But as Joseph has said, we need to have bankable projects. We need to work with the utilities and with the government to make sure that the right environment is there. But we see that we're quite happy, we're ready to go. And I mean, hopefully there'll be an announcement soon about a project that we're kicking off in Somalia. So yeah, pretty excited. Yeah.
Very, very exciting. Abdulrazak, any final remarks, conclusions?
Thank you all of you. I want to thank you very much for this organizing interesting and useful panel discussion. I think this opportunity will continue in the future to solve or develop the energy sector problem or the gaps. I hope to again and again, I think Power Africa is involving to encourage or develop the energy sector East Africa, especially Somalia. Thank you very much. And also all the panelists, I wanted to thank you. And I don't have any more questions, but I wanted to remind you if we wanted to develop the energy sector of Somalia, we have to think how all the private sector come together and make one company to develop the energy sector and also to make the affordable price, which is accessible. And this role, I think it is very important to play the government and also to encourage the international partners like African Development Bank, Power Africa, and other interesting partners. And also like Mrio machine technology is very important according to the technical laws and revenue laws. And I hope we will get the solution for the loss that we have in currency, which is very high percentage. Maybe sometimes it reaches 30% of loss, which is include the technical loss and revenue loss. Sometimes the meter, kilowatt meter is not it's not the high quality according to whole Somalia. And if we get that loss number of kilowatt, we will reduce the tariff. Thank you very much. I think this is the first time that I attended to this high-level panel discussion, and I am so interested to attend in the future. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you, Abdulrazak. Mohammed Dubbo, any final remarks?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Abdi Shakur. This has been a very wonderful engagement. I must appreciate again Power Africa team, RTI, the organizing for organizing this important platform, through which I'm very sure provoking ideas have been exchanged and engaged. We urge partners, including Power Africa and CIMAD Lab, to organize a more interactive expo where US companies can showcase their technology and equipment offerings to their Somali counterparts. That will for sure deepen the interaction and partnerships. We cannot overstate the role of the energy in the economic development equation for our country, specifically recovering from COVID-19 and also recovering from a long civil war. I would like to put more emphasis on the rural electrification programs and projects. Urban electrification project has received more investments so far. So we look to forward seeing more urban electrification investments. We continue to call more FDI into this critical sector, and we are happy to inform participants that the federal government of Somalia will be launching a comprehensive energy sector report in the next 2 weeks, supported by the IFC World Bank team, basically to unlock sectoral investments in this great sector. We also take this opportunity to urge the Somali private sector to formalize their businesses and make them more investable so that the foreign investors can be attracted through partnerships. Finally, we call the US companies and technology service providers such as Gigawatt to consider investing in Somalia. It's time, and I'm very sure the early move advantage will basically be accorded to. With those few remarks, I would like to call it a day from my end, and I appreciate your participation and your interactive discussions and ideas. And thank you so much. Looking forward to meeting you all again.
Thank you so much. Joseph, any final remarks, maybe in 1 minute?
It's all in the follow-up. Show us you're serious. We're here.
Thank you.
Shine on.
So if there are any, I've seen that there are a lot of comments were coming through the chat box. If there are any burning questions, maybe we can take one. If any that is not been addressed that they would like to quickly ask. Julia, are there any questions that you cited?
Most of the ones on the chat group have already been responded to, but maybe the participants, anyone who hasn't had their question responded to or would like to just unmute and ask, we can give 1 or 2 participants an opportunity before we close off. Feel free to just raise your hand.
1 minute each.
Yeah, sure.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. Right. Hi, my name is Sarida. I have an energy, renewable energy company in Mogadishu. And in addition to that, I provide solar training, and we travel to rural areas to sell solar lights to people who really need it. And we have worked with different companies and different organizations internationally. And I really enjoyed hearing today all the different views. It looks like there is a whole new doors opening for all the companies that are in the energy sector. And it sounds absolutely amazing. And the investment, that is very important. But I think you forgot today a very important issue, and that is actually women in the energy sector. Yes, I have been, my company, I co-founded this company in 2020. I found an investment that is Tamarso, that is also another renewable energy company. And I really wanted, when I started, a company that is renewable energy. We sell solar lights, solar home systems, small shops, small homes. And I thought, okay, I really wanted a staff that is made of women. And I came into a very difficult situation. I couldn't find a female engineering. I couldn't find, and if I approached young ladies or women, and they were saying, oh, this is men's section, so we will not be going in there. So to change that, I have sought, what is it called? In the international communities. I participated in different trainings and learned more about how to involve women in the energy sector. So I created a training, and I trained now 26 girls or young women who are capable of doing all these things that that involve in the company. So when people say the renewable energy sector is, is a lot of heavy lifting, they have to go on roof. No, they don't have to. They can do the smart energy and everything else.
That's very important topic. Thank you very much. I think it's worth mentioning. I would let our Chief of Party, Dawi, to address in his closing remarks the gender activities that we're doing under our program. But thank you very much for raising that point. We will also leave our contact details, and you can always follow up with us, and we will get in touch. With that, I would like to thank you so much. With that, I would like to quickly hand it over to Dawi.
Thank you, Shakur. Wow, that's all I can say. What an amazing afternoon. It's the time just flew by. I would just like to say thank you, first of all. So thanks to Ambassador Andre, to the USAID office, the Somali Growth Office. Thank you for supporting us as well. Then also Mr. Muhammad from the CIMAT iLab. Thank you for being part of this this afternoon as well. And then our moderator and panelists. I think a job well done. I made some notes, and I think the striking theme for me this afternoon is the optimism, and I think the ambassador mentioned that as well. The optimism regarding this sector. He was optimistic about the sector. I know there are challenges in this sector, and we're not naive. I mean, we mentioned some of these challenges, and I think listening to you all, I just got the impression that Somalia is on the verge of a breakthrough, and I can really hope, with our support, of course, as a small player in this solution, that we can contribute. I think the important thing that was mentioned right at the end is women. I looked at the participants throughout the afternoon, and by the way, they went up, I think, to close to 100 at one stage. It would be interesting to know how many women participated in this, and I think that is a challenge back to us as energy professionals, as males. How can we address this? And I would love to talk about that as well. So Shakur mentioned the work that we do as the East Africa Energy Program. We are supporting energy networks for women in the region. So as an example, we've done the WIRE network, which is Women in Rwandan Energy as an example, a huge program that we're running in Rwanda, and many other others as well. So thank you for everybody's participation. Thank you for hanging around 2 hours later. It was an interesting afternoon, and as I said, thanks to USAID for making all of this possible, for supporting this program. And I'm sure with the success that we've seen today, this is going to be a future event again. And I would gladly support something again for Somalia in the energy sector. So Shakur, thank you. Back to you.
Well, thanks, everybody. I think that kind of brings us to the conclusion of our session. Juliet, my colleague, provided our email address. So if you can maybe copy from the chat box for any comments, follow-up that you might have. We appreciate our panelists, the time they have taken in their very busy schedule. We look forward to engaging you in the future, and thank you very much for the time you have taken today. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
And see, President Biden just made an announcement on Somalia, so it's a good sign.
That's great. I'll read that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.